Really excited to talk a little bit about Gatton Park and downtown tonight. Just before we get started, show of hands, how many have been to Gatton Park so far? Oh my gosh, everybody almost. So that gives me an idea of the difficulty of questions I might get later. But wanted to talk a little bit about my background really quick. As Ethan mentioned, I started in downtown planning and development organizations, both in Louisville and Lexington. And it sort of framed a lot of my approach to public space, really, because I was in these organizations that were doing short and long range planning, but also the implementation and the operation side of things. And so I wanted to spend a little bit of time tonight just talking about kind of how we got here and talk about some of the efforts that have gone into planning in downtown and that led to Gatton Park. Because while we're maybe a month old, the process and sort of the drive to get to our park opening and to a lot of these other fantastic public space openings in downtown that you've seen over the recent years has been really over a decade of effort. And I can't comprehensively talk about everything, and there's been plenty of individuals as well who've really been great advocates, probably many people in this room that have driven a lot of this. But just to give a little bit of context, and starting not necessarily at the beginning, but even looking in 2012, there was the Rupp Arena Arts and Entertainment District Task Force, which is kind of a mouthful, but in that publication, you started to see some of these early ideas of a commons and a central park being developed in downtown. There was, in this location where Gatton Park is, there was plenty of other ideas as well. I think at one point there was a lake proposed. That was a little bit before my time, but I'm not sure how feasible a lake right next to Rupp Arena in that parking lot would have been, but it was apparently on the table at a time. But this really started to take hold around 2012. And shortly after that, the Downtown Development Authority in Lexington, with support from the College of Design here at UK, again, you see UK being a great partner in the community, and Fate Alliance Foundation helped kick off an international design competition that sort of master planned what this might look like if you had this stretch of commons in this park, and how that might come together, providing some early vision for it. We were fortunate enough to have Scape, the landscape architecture firm, win that challenge. It was led by Kate Orff, who, as some may know, went on to receive a MacArthur Genius Grant for her work in New York. We were fortunate to get her before she received that and became maybe unavailable. But she did some great work trying to plan a natural landscape and bring a lot of what we see in these horse farms and the landscape that Visit Lex and Erica talked about into downtown. And so through that strip of Town Branch Commons in the park and just how we might do that. But again, that's kind of an early concepts, and these things still take time to develop and to figure out how we get there. And things really started to pick up a little bit of speed. And in 2015, in 2015. At that time, a local group of community leaders started to talk with 21st Century Parks about how they got their project done in Floyd's Fork in Louisville and how they've advised other communities across the country. And one of the things that really came out of that and around that time frame, and again, these are rough years, so 2013 to 2015, was that some of these efforts needed to be split up. It was kind of too big to take on both the park and the commons. And so the city took on the Town Branch Commons project, handling all of that work in the right-of-way. And then the private sector took on raising funds to run a conservancy-led park, which later became, obviously, Gatton Park. And so while we collaborate a ton, both on everything from planning to, hey, what are you doing, what are you using for your dog park material, down to the details with the Lexington Parks Department. We are separate entities, separate organizations, and separate funding. So where Gatton Park is fundraising, is doing earned revenue from concerts, foundations, and things like that. The city, of course, has their Parks Department doing great work with the tax dollars, has the new park tax, which is completely separate from anything Gatton Park would use, so we don't receive any of that funding. But the other thing to come out of that is this realization that if we're doing this commons across downtown and this park, we really need to think holistically about how public space is being used downtown and what's in that in-between spaces, because we have a lot of these little pockets and we need to think about those too. And out of that came what is a little bit unique, maybe less so now, but especially in 2015, of a public space, public life study that rather than just a downtown plan or a comp plan or something like that most people have seen before, it's really saying what is happening in the public space and how is it being used here in Lexington. It was led by Gale Studio, who founded in the 60s by Jan Gale. They eventually spread across into the US as well. But he's most known for his drive in Copenhagen, where they were a car-dominated community, gridlock traffic, just a terrible place to be, essentially, in the 60s if you were a pedestrian or a cyclist, and really led the efforts to change that infrastructure and change that mindset, and now it's one of the most pedestrian and bike-friendly countries in the world. But they advise on public spaces across the country, and in visiting Lexington, started talking to residents, finding out how do you like to spend your time in public spaces, what's here, what are you looking for, what's missing, and so, started to get these ideas from people want places to spend more time, places that are hospitable enough that you want to stay, that are family and kid friendly, that greenery and trees, and looking at basically any community feedback possible. And they looked at the existing places and not just are there people there, but are people staying there? Because we want to create places that people stay, that are sticky. And so out of that, they have a general philosophy of pilot a project, test it, measure it, and keep improving. And so that really is sort of what's driven a lot of the public space work in downtown. If you think of Charles Young Park, was one of the pilot projects out of this at the other end of the commons, which led to a permanent park and the improvements you see up there. As well as Phoenix Park was another pilot that tested, and then, as I believe it was last week, just opened. And so that process has driven a lot of the improvements in Lexington and the community feedback as well. We've been fortunate through our own community feedback efforts with partners like Civic Lex, the city, using On the Table. Gatton Park itself received over 16,000 comments. That's really where we stopped counting, that helped drive the design and what people wanted to see, and frankly changed a lot of the design based on what people wanted to see in their public spaces. The stage is very prominent now. It originally was not a big feature of the park, but it's something that people wanted, arts groups wanted, just as an example. And the other thing this led into was an organization that we partner with called Reimagining the Civic Commons. We're one of about 10 cities across the country that participate in this. But it really sets some standards on how we measure our impact and what are the goals that we're trying to fulfill in public spaces. And it really can be broken into about 4 categories: civic engagement, socioeconomic mixing, environmental sustainability, and value creation. And really a lot of the impacts that we want to measure, and I know we're talking a lot about economic impact today, but again, we want to think about holistically on what are the benefits of public space, from health, from the environment, from community building. And it really can fall into those categories. And so as we started working with that, 2020, we contracted with Sasaki to design the park, and Dean Builds and Elaine Allen, our local construction crews, to build it for us while we continued fundraising. 2022, Town Branch Commons opens, and then 2025, Gatton Park opens 1 month ago today, on August 23rd. And so it's a quick click through the slides, but really when you really start thinking about it, this stuff takes time, and it's difficult, takes a lot of work, and sometimes takes a decade. But a lot of that does come from good planning, good community input, and kind of setting a vision and sticking to that. And so going back to some of those civic commons goals on what we measure and the why of why is it beneficial to have public spaces, what do we get out of that? I'm going to talk a little bit broadly about that. If I'm fortunate enough to come back in a year, hopefully we'll have some good measurements from Gatton Park to talk about. But just running through those categories, it's a picture from our opening, but just kind of starting on the socioeconomic mixing. We know there's a desire for this and a recognized need for our community to come together. And when one of the on the table one of the on the table events, 26% of the respondents raised issues related to equity and social inclusion. At the same time, other surveys have shown that 43% of Lexingtonians cited parks as a primary site of connection. I think we probably all experience that in parks as well. Along the same time, we have initial numbers and counts that we have in the park for at least for the first few weeks, where it ranges from, a slow time period, 50 people in the park at a time, up to sort of the peak times a day where you might have several hundred, or even like on a Labor Day, 800 throughout the park. And we see those from all different parts of the community. We see it from visitors that are coming down from hotels, conventioneers that are walking back and forth to the park on their way back into the convention center. And it's all nationalities as well. It's a great thing when you're out walking through the park and you hear multiple languages being spoken, because you want a place that people feel welcome and that they can be there and that they're invited. Then on the civic engagement impact that parks have, Trust for Public Land has done a lot of work on this. And one of the interesting things about parks is they cross all partisan boundaries. They're omnipartisan. And people of all stripes value their time spent in the parks. And if you look at surveys of both Trump and Harris voters, they're almost identical in that they all wish they had spent more time outdoors than anywhere else. 2/3 of both Harris and Trump voters say they struck up a conversation with a person at a park they hadn't known previously. And half saying that it was with somebody with a different social or economic background. And more eloquent than me is Richard Young with Civic Lex, who talks about this a lot. But if you were at the opening of Phoenix Park, he had just a great paragraph that he sort of described it, just to quote him directly, saying that beautiful, usable public spaces are essential to strong civic health. Beyond being places to experience events and gather with friends, they allow people from different backgrounds to spend time around each other and provide an antidote to the dehumanization we see in our online lives. In a park, the people you see around you are your neighbors, and you can see the very real and human stakes of coexisting as a society. And I think Richard really nailed kind of the benefits of that civic trust that's built up when people come together, and the importance of community people being physically together in a place that they all want to be and feel welcome in. More directly, we know that parks have an environmental sustainability benefits and health benefits. In that same survey, 26% of Lexington respondents said natural features in the surrounding rural environment are the most appealing aspects of the city. So bringing that into the heart of the city is important. And 35%, and this is a few years old, I wouldn't be surprised if it's even higher if you redid the study now, said that call protecting the environment a top priority for improving Lexington. And so sort of along those lines, green infrastructure is a big part of Gatton Park. We have 3 rain gardens. The rain gardens, if you're not familiar with those or bioswales, are essentially planted basins that collect rainwater, filter it before it gets back into the system. And they can filter out as much as 95% of pollutants, and they can reduce stormwater runoff by as much as 90%. Which that stormwater ends up here. And while this is taken a couple days ago, when you see the creek pretty low, because we hadn't had rain until today for what feels like forever, it makes it a really tough environment to grow plants in a new park, if anybody was wondering. But the few inches of the creek right there can quickly turn into about 12 feet, like we saw in the spring. And what people don't realize is at Gatton Park in the creek right here, about 1,500 acres, almost all of downtown drains to that point. And so it's incredibly important that stormwater infrastructure works and works well, and that we can catch as many of those pollutants and filter as much of that water as we can. It's also a reminder that as you see trash in the creek or in the park down there, oftentimes that comes from elsewhere in downtown. So that trash you see somebody throwing downtown, or like you mentioned Raven Run, feel free to yell at them because this is where it ends up. We want to protect that. But we rebuilt about 1,000 linear feet of creek embankment and replanted, took out invasive species. And, it was a big failure on my part not to include a before picture, but this beautiful stone wall, there's about 100 feet of that towards the west end of the park, that originally the wall itself was collapsing in, but that's the original limestone built in that location from 1792. And so the infrastructure itself was some of the oldest working or functioning infrastructure in Lexington, several hundred years old, which is pretty incredible when you think about that. And it's been rebuilt with the backing, a concrete backing, and a wonderful stonemason named Cesar Aguilar, who's done a lot of work in Lexington and around the Bluegrass, rebuilt this for us. And so we've been able to use the same limestone that's several hundred years old, and it's back to work again. We also know that parks can reduce the heat island effect. Again, this has been a hot summer, and if you've walked anywhere downtown or anywhere on pavement, you know how hot it gets. But the parks can reduce temperatures as much as 7 to 12 degrees, and then can extend about half a mile beyond the park site itself, that cooling effect. And so we have 500 trees planted, 32 species, and 30,000 new plants are in the park, which at about 12 acres, that sounds like a lot, but it just shows you kind of what you've lost in some of the places where we've had too much asphalt, too much pavement. It's a lot of plants that can go in those areas and can provide a real benefit. And then on the health side, and one of the reasons we're developing a pretty robust programming is that supervised activity increases the usage by 48% and really increases physical activity. It has enormous health benefits to the community of people getting out, being active, getting in the park, jumping on our splash pad. There we go, sorry about that. Additionally, we have a half-mile walking loop that connects both to the Town Branch Trail going out towards the Distillery District, and the Legacy Trail comes in from the other side, and then the Town Branch Commons comes across the north side of the park. And so that's still part of the commons at that north larger walkway. But that we know that walking loops increase park use by 80% with twice as many seniors. And so when thinking about how we planned and designed the park, the impact and who benefits from the impact is just as important. Making sure that you're appealing to kids in the playground, different ages of kids in the playground. The play tower in that one slide is enormous and is really cool and fast. Maybe it's a little scary for some of the smaller kids, although not as many as you would think, but there's some smaller toddler play areas, but having space in the rec lawn for people to come play a game of soccer, having the board games and people playing chess in the plaza, and something that can appeal to all different ages and make sure everybody's welcome and that one user group isn't just dominating the whole park is incredibly important. But that path is a big part of that. And exercise for dogs as well. And so there's about 9,600 square feet of dog park space for large and small dogs. And then finally on the value creation, the cities experience an economic growth, and this is done another Trust for Public Land study. are investing more in parks and open spaces, and they're attracting and retaining workforce. I think intrinsically, I think we all know that places that have these amenities want to make people stay here, and that's, we want these students at UK to stay, to start their own businesses, to start their own lives here. We want to not lose the people that have grown up here either. And then the concentration of businesses that grow up around parks and the real estate development around parks contributes also into the local, everything from the tax rolls to, again, creating those new neighborhood businesses. The park itself as an activity generator creates opportunities for businesses as well. And as many numbers as we could probably dig up about the benefits of parks, and there's a lot. I could probably throw 1,000 statistics at you. I think if we all really think about it, we've all been in a public space, a park, where we've either felt that, either the tranquility or the peace of being in a space, and felt the happiness of being there. If it's somewhere else, maybe we wish it was in our own community, or if it's here, it gives a little bit of civic pride about what we have. We've all probably struck up a conversation with somebody we didn't know, whether it's kids, or watching kids play, or petting somebody's dog. And there's places we've visited that we know that we have all liked. I don't know if anybody's been in Greenville, South Carolina. It's incredible downtown, incredible place, but 40 years ago it really wasn't. Chattanooga is known as kind of this outdoor mecca, but really has industrial roots. And it's really taken people who've had that patience, that persistence, and that vision that if you start something pretty hard, you can take something that's maybe underutilized and not benefiting the community as much, and really come and develop something, a place that people want to be. And that's what we wanted to try to do with Gatton Park, and what we want to continue to partner with others on. So happy to take any questions. Thank you all. Yeah, I think we're starting to see a lot of interaction, and it's interesting, between the Manchester next door, both from people parking there, but also people using that and maybe going to an event there and then coming over to the park, as well as the Manchester Hotel, which has been really interesting. Is early on, almost immediately, and really before we were open and they were supposed to be in there, people were walking through to the convention center. A lot of the business travelers were staying there and walking on into downtown from there. And I think there's still open green space sites around the park. I think we'll see those develop further. What those might be yet, we'll see. Short answer is it depends. So for opening day, we had probably throughout the day, I would say 3,000 to 5,000 people. That's a lot of people. For Labor Day, there was about 800, and things get a little bit crazy with that number of people. The thing to consider with it is, do people want free parking or just parking? Because there's lots of parking, but free parking is more limited. So currently on Manchester Street, there's 25 to 30 spaces. And on a normal day, that cycles through and really works pretty well between the people that are walking and biking in, or people that may be coming from somewhere else, and then others that are just parking in the street spots on Manchester. And for paid parking around that, the Main Street Baptist Church has a lot that's really convenient, and I think it's an hourly charge, but it's pretty affordable, that we've started to see some people use. Again, the Manchester parking lot. And then for large events, a lot of people have used the High Street parking lot at Rupp, which is, for things like concerts and things like that, people sort of figure that out and have their spots. If you can get 22,000 to Rupp, you can get 3,000 to 5,000 into the park for that. The real challenge is that sort of busy times on the day-to-day, when you might have 500 to 800 people in, and that's where we're looking at different ways to direct people to places to park and trying to put as much information on our website as we can. And awesome. So sometimes an issue, sometimes not, but there's frequently spaces on a normal day on Manchester.
This
So Triangle and Thoroughbred both are. They're a little bit different, obviously, than ours. Triangle Park it's owned by the Triangle, or both are owned by the Triangle Foundation. I believe the Convention Center manages Triangle Park, though. To my knowledge, we're the only like conservancy managed park in the city, at least of that scale, of our scale, of course. So it's been interesting because as you go through it and you are in the details of building it, there's a million things I see that we probably need to improve. But overall, the response has been really fantastic. It's been extremely encouraging to, hear the feedback from the community, and even, I won't say the criticisms, even the suggestions we've gotten have been, by and large, in good spirit and not hateful, which is not always the case in things like that. Of people wanting to make it better. So we've been really pleased with how people have received it. But always open to suggestions and things we can do to make it better. I know even on the little things, there's stuff like the family bathroom sign's not labeled, and we're working on that. And so stuff like that. But the challenge is, at least with this one, it's so unique, and a lot of times projects like that are pretty unique in terms because every site's different. In our case, we leased this from the convention center for 100 years or whatever, but another site might be a little bit different. So I don't have a great answer on that, other than building that spirit of collaboration with the city, with the state, because there's also state property involved in there as well. And continuing to do that is just critical to making those things work, as well as the community support in those things. I know it seems like 10 years is a long time to get something like that made, but this was the largest fundraising effort that wasn't university or hospital related in Lexington's history. And so kind of trying to do that and pull that off the first time and is pretty challenging. And I know our CEO, Allison Langford, been working on that for, like I say, for 10 years. I've only been here for almost 4 of it. But just continuing that spirit of collaboration and that community involvement and community push to make better trails, to make better civic spaces is just key.